10 to, but I can...
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Royal Blue Podcast Soundcheck. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Royal Blue Podcast Soundcheck. Monday show live. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Hello and welcome to the Royal Blue Podcast. It's the Monday show. We are live and I am your host, Ian Croll. Chris Beasley and Joe Thomas are slacking off. They have taken the morning off to prepare for tonight's Bramley Moor test event. So joining me in the Royal Blue studio today to talk all things Everton, we've got the long-awaited return of Gav Buckland.
Long-awaited return.
Well, it's been over a week.
A week? Yeah, I'm allowed some time off,
Well,
yeah.
You know, you're always away, Gav. You're always away.
Yeah, and make the most of it. So well, it was a good week, wasn't it? I was here for the derby, and I managed to see the Crystal Palace game. So since the Bournemouth defeat, it's been nothing but good news, wasn't it? Really, and Wednesday night was memorable, wasn't it?
It was. I think everyone wants to have a little chip in on Wednesday night. What was what were your thoughts on that? Very quickly.
I thought it was a great occasion, and I thought, thankfully, the second thing is, thankfully, the last bit of Goodison history in a derby was Everton's history, not Liverpool's history.
Yeah, good way of looking at it.
And thirdly, it made it a welcome change to see the other side haranguing the referee at the end of a derby because of a sense of perceived injustice, where on occasions, certainly under Moyes, it's been us, hasn't it? I think at least two.
Up there with Goodison Park moments.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Number one or at least top three.
Oh, isn't it? Well, it's a recency impact, isn't it? But, yeah, it'll be in the top five, won't it, really? Well, not just the goal, the defence after the goal, which some would say were even more enjoyable. But, yeah, it was only right, wasn't it? Right and fitting that the last bit of Goodison Park history was written by us, not them. And for a long period of time, that didn't look the case, did it?
And I've seen a stat as well saying that the only team to have a better record at Goodison Park than Everton is Port Vale. I think they've won.
Was Albert Atland going to give him a name check? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think that was I think that was the stat. So obviously Liverpool failed to get one on top of us on that one.
Yeah. And we scored the in the first and last derbies at Goodison. We opened the score in the 11th minute in both games. There you go.
Fair enough. We've also got guest Evertonian and author of the book of the unofficial Everton timeline, the Mashiri Years, second edition. We've got, making a second podcast appearance, Steve Dickinson. Steve, how are things?
Pretty good, thanks. It's just exactly to the day almost a year since I made my inaugural podcast appearance here. And so much has changed for Everton in that timeline. And that's really what inspired us to update our book, The Unofficial Everton Timeline, about the Mashiri years, and bring out a second edition, because the first edition really finished at the end of 2023. The story was still very open then. Mashiri was still in place, of course. 777 looked like the likely new owners. Such a disaster that would have been. Hard to imagine, but that was the case at the time. We were still waiting for the outcome of the appeal on the 10-point deduction, which actually came in about an hour after I left the studio. And Joe and Chris were busy all afternoon then, as you were, reporting on all of that. Waiting for the second official commission to hear the second charges. It was just all bad news for the club, really, on and off the field. And it's just so refreshing to be here now talking about the results since Moyes has come back to the club. At least now we only really have to worry about the on-field performance. And that's so refreshing for Evertonians.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, we'll come on to the book a little bit later on, but you can see if you're watching on YouTube, we've got the book on the Royal Blue Wall of Fame, if that's what you want to call it. We've also got mugs and cups memorabilia, I guess, if that's what you want to call it as well. So, yeah, we'll come on to that, Steve. You're going to the test event tonight as well,
I am,
aren't you?
yes, very lucky for... I applied for tickets for me and my pal, who I sit next to on the top balcony, and we were pulled out from the ballot, so we're looking forward to that very much.
Absolutely, yeah. Same here. Really excited. Make sure you wrap up warm, though, because I've just been outside on the way into the office before, and it was absolutely freezing. So I don't know.
It's mid-February, isn't it?
It is mid-February. It is, but we are open to the elements, I guess.
Well,
there
is the microclimate, isn't it? Really, it's a different climate entirely, isn't it? Than to Goodison.
Absolutely. Okay, well, today's agenda, we're going to talk about another Everton win. Everton are undefeated in 5 league games, and no team in the Premier League has taken more points than Everton since David Moyes was appointed manager. So I'm looking forward to this chat. Always good when we can get 3 points on the board and Everton win. As always, give this video a thumbs up, drop us a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. Just a couple more plugs before we do actually get going. Wednesday's show, we've got Dave Powell in the studio for a live show, so it's going to be a bit of a live Q&A. Dave is Reach's Business of Football writer, so we're going to talk all things freaking, stadium, naming rights, PSR, plenty more. Thought it'd be a good time to get Dave in, considering there's a little bit of a break this week, no midweek game, and we've got a couple of days before the Manchester United game on Saturday as well. Got a couple of shout outs, to be honest. So some really positive words with regards to the podcast the past couple of days. All right. So shout out to basically Steve. I don't know his name, surname, sorry, but basically Steve, who I met in the Masons in Old Swan for the game. So I was out with a couple of mates and basically looking for a table, and we find one which got a couple of half-empty drinks on it. And we go, well, we'll go and sit there. So I sat down and my mate goes to the bar. Next minute, this lad comes running over. I was thinking, oh, God, sat at his table. But he weren't. He was coming over to say, oh, I know you from the podcast. And he just had so many kind words to say about the podcast. So, yeah, shout out to Steve from Old Swan.
What a great name.
Big fan of the podcast. Yeah. Well, we've got another shout out for Stephen Eckert, who sent me an email this morning. More kind words on the podcast as well. I haven't had a chance to reply to him yet. But he's from America. He listens to the podcast. He said he never gets to listen to it or watch it live. However, he couldn't have said more nice things about the podcast. So made up, to be honest.
That's a big ask to get in the middle of the night to watch the podcast live.
Probably is, isn't it?
Do you want a confession? I once had a very, very drunken conversation with my mate in the Masons in early 1987 when it looks like Everton had binned off the title to Liverpool again. About that we should, and this is the type of conversation we have when younger, that we should get rid of Howard and get Graham Souness as boss.
Wow.
Yeah. I think that was about January 87 and how wrong we were. Yeah, 4 months later we won the title. But yeah, it's funny. Those type of stupid conversations, which I had on Saturday night when you've had like a few beers, it was not one I look back on fondly. To be fair, the way things panned out.
I bet you the Masons is a bit different now compared to what it was back then.
I don't know. I've not been there for a while.
I love the Masons, to be honest. It's always chocker, but it's easy to get served at the bar.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we always go there to watch. There's loads of Evertonians in there as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether it's a red or a blue pub, but...
It's funny how that's driven up over the years, hasn't it? Liverpool pubs and Everton pubs.
Yeah, it's a bit of a thing, isn't it?
Where's it come from? Especially, and it goes back days before televisions as well, isn't it? It's not as if something that's been driven by live telly, you know. It's gone back many, many years.
Kindred spirits.
Possibly, yeah. It's just
just preference of the landlord, maybe.
It's true. It's just that's always been the case ever since, like, you know, I've been a teenager. I always like Liverpool and Everton pubs. Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay, let's get into it then. Gav, you watched the game, Crystal Palace.
I did.
It was a game where I honestly thought that we might struggle in. I think we did, performance-wise, but just on the back of the Liverpool, draw, the ending to that game, I thought we might have overexerted ourselves a little bit, but quite clearly, well, we were resilient and got the win.
Yeah, and a few positional changes as well, didn't he? Because it's obviously only got about 13 fit outfield players, something like that. Yeah, we started off slowly, didn't we? I think that was hangover, wasn't it, from Wednesday night? But we found our range, I think, after about 20 minutes. Scored the goal. Started off slowly again, I think, in the second half, and then picked up. And it was a typical early years Moyes phase 1 performance, wasn't it? That could have been a game between 2002 and 2005, really, where they kept it tight, stayed in the game, and nicked something.
Same scoreline, of course, as Moyes' first ever game at Goodison.
Yeah.
A 2-1 victory over Fulham.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, nice similarity. And he would have Palace is a significant game, isn't it? Because in the more history, 04-05 when we finished fourth, we got hammered by Arsenal on the opening day. Went to Palace, we 1-0 down at Palace. We in the second game, come back to win 3-1. So yeah, so it was symbolic in many respects, and it was what we've seen from Moyes in the Premier League since he come back. Really, after the Villa game, he's quite clearly drilled the team well. I think Alcaraz has offered us something a bit different on Saturday, and Beto's playing like Thierry Henry, isn't he? on heat, isn't he? He's just been sensational.
What a comparison that is.
But there's a half true. But no, but he I was interested in the piece he did. But was it with Chris and Joe after ran out today about the extra training he's been doing? And,
sorry, I forgot to mention that Joe and Chris did a post-match podcast in the car on the way home. Yeah. So you can go and listen to that on the audio platform.
I think it's online, isn't it? Yeah. And he's quite, even before he mentioned that, he's quite clearly, hasn't he, been receiving extra coaching from the new staff on holding the ball up, and also keeping your head up when you've got in possession and looking around you, and he, rather than just blindly just pass the ball anyway. He's obviously, his general game awareness. They've obviously worked a hell of a lot on that, and he's taken the benefits, hasn't he, from it? I think
he's staying on his feet a lot better.
Yeah. Good point. I mean, because the one time he's been off his feet was it the Leicester game? Was the penalty that should have been a penalty in the Leicester game at the Park End where the fella came across and
wiped him out,
wiped him out. Yeah, I mean that's the only time I can think he's gone to ground, where he as you say, Steve, he did go to ground quite a bit, didn't he? In his, I was going to say first spell, it just feels like two spells he's had, under the previous manager, and and he's made a big difference, and he was rightly man of the match on Saturday, and great. It's fine margins, isn't it? Really, if you don't. That many angles to that Tarkowski goal. If he'd gone into Palace on the back of it, if he'd been knocked out the cup, and it could have been awkward then. But you get a draw against Liverpool, win against Palace. The fine margins in this game are there, aren't they? So yeah, great win. Typical Moyes performance of his early years at Goodison, and sets up nicely for few winnable games, and that includes Man United at home.
Absolutely. I mean, Steve, let's stick with Beto because he is dominating my agenda. I guess it's been a whirlwind transformation. I'll be honest with you, this is not me bragging or anything like that. I did think there was a player in Beto before David Moyes came. I just thought we weren't playing to his strengths. I think quite clearly now you can see that the team is playing to his strengths, whether that's balls in behind, over the top, he's able to run on there. We know he struggles slightly when he's holding the ball up, but even as Gav's just attested to there, he's quite clearly improved over the past couple of weeks. But he's not just improved his game, he's quite clearly a clinical striker as well, calm in front of goal.
I remember that tremendous goal he scored against Newcastle last season. The one where we pinged the ball around about 24 passes in a row.
Right at the end.
At the end. And he broke from the halfway line, cut inside and pushed the ball through the keeper's legs. And that's absolutely the kind of goal he's scoring now, isn't it? Yeah. Play the ball in front of him. And he's strong. He's hard to put off the ball. Ping it up around his head, his chest or something, it'll bounce off into the next country. So, Moyes has certainly changed the approach and the tactics of how to get the ball to Beto, and it's really paying off. And of course, Moyes, as I always say about a good general is a lucky general, and David Moyes has had a few strokes of luck. The last minute
lucky
goal.
and unlucky ever managers are a regular theme, aren't they? About this podcast, you'd be unbelievably, yeah.
So, but I think as well as having a bit of luck, Moyes has mellowed compared with how he was in that first 11 years. Of course, that's a long time, 11 years. So he developed as a manager, undoubtedly, from a raw guy coming from Preston North End to through the time he had with us. But all of the highs and the lows that he's had since leaving Everton have obviously developed him as a personality, developed him as an individual and a manager. And I think we're starting to see that now. And he has got the players playing to their strengths. As you said earlier, there aren't that many players in the squad fit at the moment, so thank goodness. But he has got them playing to their strengths, including Beto. But not only Beto, I think that they're all performing so much better.
Do you think, just what you say, Moyes is mellow, do you think that's a concerted effort from him since coming back, or do you think it's more just over time, how he's developed as a manager, as a person?
I think it's over time. I mean, I think he will be respecting the TFG people and the owners at Everton. He'll feel comfortable in that environment, and I think there'll be a good rapport going backwards and forwards. But I think the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune and war have helped Moyes over time to become a more rounded person. And I think there's a lot more of a smile on his face. And of course, it's easy to smile when you're winning. But he is, I think, a far better manager now than he was in his early years at Everton.
I guess in that sense as well, Gav, then, I'm not a psychologist in any stretch of the imagination, but with what Steve is saying there, do you think it makes him that mellowing out is actually, it kind of clears your head and makes you a better tactical manager as well? You can see things differently.
Possibly.
When things are maybe not going the way you want
that's
them
just
to.
experience in management. I mean, everybody mellows when they get older, don't they? You do, from the ages of 20 to 40, from 40 to 60, you change. And you have to change. I mean, football managers, you have to change, because football management now is a completely different beast than what it was when Moyes started, in terms of the way you can see players and what you can say to players and what you can't say to players. So you have to change as well, don't you? And for Moyes to survive that long, is testimony to his personality and that willingness to adapt. Whether it change the tactics, you just learn that through experience, through playing so many games, about, I've been able to switch things around because I've been able to switch things around before, because you've done it several times. So yeah, it does. Football management does change anyway. The one thing I've noticed though, and this is probably, he's not soft Moyes, he's probably looked back and he's had opportunities many times to look back on his first phase ever Manager. And one of the things that supporters have criticised him for since about that reign is that talking down a little bit of, knife to gunfight type stuff, big 4, big 6, all that type of thing. And and it's helped that we've had a few good results. I'm conscious that he's being very positive. Is what he said about, I think he said it's good to see the club getting, good news. I think he said last week, good news about them, all that type of thing, and a few other bits he said. And I think that's just learning from probably, what were mistakes. I won't say mistakes first time round, things that he could have done better the first time round. And, he didn't, I don't think I heard him say, well, Liverpool at the top of the table, they're a bigger club, blah, blah, blah. It was all about Everton and good news for us and being positive and taking things forward. And I think that's probably a little bit of a reaction to his first spell in charge, where he did get accused of playing things down and, plucky old Everton, all this type of thing. And I think that's just good management. But you change anyway. I mean, I remember Ferguson saying, didn't he, that many when he was about Moyes' age, that he was a pussycat when he first started at Aberdeen, which is probably true. I think the players get managed by Ferguson when he was 60 would probably disagree, but the players he had at Aberdeen would probably say, yeah, he is. And you just change as a person, and you change as a football manager, because you've got to change to survive, haven't you? Really, in that environment. So Moyes has 700 Premier League games. He's not been done that because he's a bang average manager who doesn't change. You of course change in terms of your attitude to people and circumstances. But I don't think the one. I've said this before, which in relation to the previous managers. I don't think in football you change your style of play if you're a manager. You might tinker around with it, but I think the beliefs that you have when you first go into your first football club, when you leave the management game 30, 40 years later, if you're not 30, 40 years later, even 20 or 30 years later, if you're very, very lucky, I don't think your tactics are very, massively different to what they were, and your style. But at the start, you've got your own style of management, and Ferguson had that. Ferguson played attacking football. Aberdeen played at Man United. You've seen that side. Somebody like Benitez, Mourinho. Guardiola's always played like this, hasn't he? I don't think you change. You may switch things around a bit and tinker around the edges, but ultimately, Moyes has got a style of playing like every other manager's got a style of playing, and you saw that on Saturday, didn't he? Compared to his early years, Evan. It was not dissimilar,
Is he not more flexible or maybe?
Oh yeah,
pragmatic?
That's where your experience comes from, isn't it? And you have to adapt to different changes in the way the game's played. But you don't fundamentally change your way, your style of play as a manager. It remains pretty much the same throughout your career. It's just that you just have a single way of working. And that goes for all managers. I can't think of any manager who at the start played massive attacking football and then became really defensive. And the opposite way around. You do have that. You do have that style of play. Where you develop, I think, is what Steve was saying. Your personality. How you relate to people, using the experiences you gain. That's how you change. I don't think you change your style of football. Other than you can tinker it around.
No, but there are managers out there now, like the United manager Amarim, who's refusing to change his style of play for no one. He's just being stubborn almost, even though it's not working. Yeah,
well, but you can tinker around with it. But that's what managers do. They don't start playing like sort of I don't know back five at the start and end up playing two at the back or whatever. Two forwards and end up playing four forwards. You just don't do that. And it's just an interesting thing, really, related to Moyes.
I remember Moyes meeting up against Everton a few years ago when Sam Allardyce was the manager. And it was an end-of-season game. And I think all of the hope was that Everton was safe. I think we were in 9th position at the time. And the hope was that we were going to go down there and play with a bit of freedom under Allardyce. And we didn't. He played two defensive midfielders. He played basically five at the back, Cenk Tosun up front, and got beat and blamed the players, which he often did, Sam Allardyce. In the meantime, David Moyes, in charge of West Ham, was just getting on with turning his team into better players.
Yeah.
And I just think that's a consistent theme with David Moyes. He doesn't blame the players. It's we, not them. And I think we've already seen that again since he's been back up at Everton now. And I think he does turn, if I was to, what is the David Moyes hallmark of management? It's turning players, probably average players in some regards, into better players.
Yeah, maximising your potential. And not just on the pitch. It was on the podcast the other week and I was saying it's off the pitch as well. If you see Moyes' team in the late 2000s, which was probably his best team, how many of them are now working in the game either as managers, coaches, pundits, or even in, director of football, and where his case, Chaos doing something similar, isn't he, in the Middle East? A lot of those players in this 2007 to 2009, 10 team are still working in the game and doing really well in the game. You've got Arteta, Carsley at the start, and that's testimony, I think, to Moyes' ability to educate people within football and to develop them as people.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's no coincidence that a lot of people basically everybody in that group has remained in football and done comparatively well. And I think that's obviously they're the ones who put the hard yards in as individuals, but it's also, I think, the education that they've had off Moyes, both in terms of how to behave both on and off the pitch. And I think that's something that's probably it's quite easy to miss that, isn't it? Really, I think that reflects well on Moyes as a manager and a person.
I mean, I think Danny Church has just seen me write me notes here down because I feel like he's just hit the nail on the head. He just brought confidence back into the players, hasn't he? Even if you look at Jack Harrison, he was obviously taken out of the team when Moyes first came in. I think he had a bit of a poor game against Villa, if I remember. Even though the overall team performance for that game, I thought we did okay. He's come back in because obviously Ndiaye is injured. I felt he had a bit of a slow start against Liverpool when he came on, but then quickly got up to speed, and I thought he did well. I thought he was fantastic, to be honest.
Master tactician as I am not. I was tweeting several weeks ago about trying Harrison on the left.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it seemed a pretty obvious thing. That's where he had more success when he played for Leeds.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's where he's come back in, and maybe out of necessity because of the injury to Ndiaye. But he's come back on the left, and he's looked a different player.
Confidence, though, for me, just like building. Obviously, that comes with wins, that comes with good results, playing well. I just think the whole individuals in that team have just shot up another level in terms of confidence.
Is the two things? Is it new manager bounce and Moyes' skills as a manager both operating at the same time?
I think a new manager bounce. I don't think it is a new manager bounce, to be honest. I think to an extent, but let's face it, we got beat by Villa.
Yeah, he's
taken it on
to do there.
Yeah, he's taken it on a little bit more,
didn't we?
I think there's a bit of new owner bounce in this as well.
Yeah, good point.
Because it must have been, even though these guys are multi-millionaires earning obscene amounts of money as Premier League players in general, it must have been pretty depressing being an Everton player in the last 2 or 3 years. And you're not immune to all of the press and the talk about changes of ownership, and are we going to be sold to some cowboys who are going to come in and sell the stadium and try and make a quick buck? And so the whole story around the club has been transformed by the takeover from TFG, and so I think that's got to have some effect on the psychology within the team as well. One could argue there was not much sign of that in the first few weeks under Sean Dyche, but I think that's another story. I think they're I was a strong fan of Sean Dyche's for the first 18 months. I think he did a tremendous job at a time that the club was completely lacking in leadership. The board had gone AWOL, dismissed, mainly resigned. The owner had certainly gone AWOL. And Sean Dyche was the only leader with a voice in the club. And so he was a lot more than a football manager at that time. He was head of the club. Why it all fell off the rails, I think, is a moot point this year, this season. Why it all fell off the rails for Sean Dyche this year. People will write PhD theses about that at some point. But
is that version 3 of the book, is it, Steve? Yeah. With version 4 to follow. Yeah, shortly after.
But I think I keep the point that there's a certain element here of new owner bounce as well.
Okay,
absolutely. I think that. Yeah. I mean, because it's the opposite of what we were saying maybe last year, the year before, that what was going off the pitch was affecting the management and players. I think Dyche, we have to mention Dyche in the comparison, forgetting about the deduction for points, we got like 48 points last year, was it? Something like that. So we're probably going to end up with something similar. This year we were only on 30, and we got 18 points in the last 13 or 14 games. So we should achieve that. So what Moyes is doing, he's not taking Dyche's team and improving on it compared to last year. He's just maintaining an equilibrium. He set last year, isn't he? Similar points total, taking us back up to the norm, as it were. I think that the challenge for Moyes, which I think he's experienced enough, is how we kick on from that, isn't it, really?
Next season.
Yeah, I think that. Said at the start of before we came on air, in relation with the Freakin group and the takeover, is they've done the easy bit. The hard bit starts now, and in some respects, Moyes, okay, it's been he's had to win a few games to take us away from the drop zone, but the hard work starts really for Moyes now, where he's in the short term, he's got us away from relegation. It's how we how we build on everything now in terms of rebuilding the squad and the new stadium and all that type of stuff. And he'll be aware of it. He's got, and that's where his experience comes in, doesn't it? That's the real challenge for him, really, for him and the coaching team and the owners as well, in terms of how they approach things. So, yeah, it's interesting. At least we got time to talk about it. Let's talk about relegation fight. I mean, somebody, I can't remember, it was on social media this morning, at the bottom of the table, I think it went up to 14th, and somebody said, "Isn't it great to look at this and not see Everton?" which I thought was quite a good shout, So,
but
not
yet
looking
to
over
see our opponents for the weekend, Man United, in that category.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The table's a bit mad, isn't it?
But that's a good thing, isn't it?
No, it's not, I'm not saying it's not. I think Steve's spot on. I think everything that he said has got merit, and I think Joe Thomas has said countless times that during Sean Dyche's reign, he was the only one with a voice. He was the leader. Unfortunately, I don't disagree with it in the sense that, he deserves credit for keeping us up over that period of time. However, in the summer, certainly, it was all about, in his mind, it was a reset and this is what I'm dealing with. And it was all, the communication coming back was all negative, wasn't it? And quite clearly, he did feel the pressure of having to lead the football club without a owner who was absent. Now Moyes has come in. He's obviously got the backing of the Freakins. That pressure of him completely running the club is not on Moyes as it maybe was for Sean Dyche. And the positive messages coming from Moyes can continue, in my eyes, for as long as possible. And he's getting the results, which only breeds success and confidence.
Well, if you think about our start to this season, I mean, lost the first 4 games, 2 draws in there, first 6 games, 2 points. But that was also the period of time at which Freakins had dropped out of the negotiations.
Yeah.
So for Sean Dyche, and again, I don't just excuse these guys because they're professionals, they get paid a lot for what they do. But from the psychology of it, in those first 6 games of the season before, I think it was the 19th of September when Freakins came back into the negotiations, then we were once again cast back into turmoil. Who is going to take this club on?
Yeah.
Are we running out of money? Have we got enough money to finish the stadium? It's so easy to switch our mindset now to this new positive Everton, going to the new stadium tonight to the test event. And here we are, 13 points from the last few games. Nobody got more points than us. But just a few short months ago, it was absolute turmoil.
Yeah. And I mean, don't talk about Dyche, but I mean, he deserves a credit there, doesn't he? As indeed does Thelwell, I think, for also operating so in a way that we've avoided the PSR charge for, up to 23, 24. So that's good. So yeah, it's there's a lot of good news going on at the moment. But I'd say the hard work begins here, doesn't it? Really, I think that's I think what Moyes has got. And I think he's bought himself time, isn't he? He's got an opportunity over the last 12 or 13 games to look at the players, hasn't he? And to really understand where the weaknesses are and strengths are in the squad to inform any decision making we have in the summer, rather than just do a lot of ad hoc team selections just to try and get a point. I think somewhere, So I think he bought himself some time there.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing from Moyes' point of view, because he said it in the past in his first stint, when we avoided relegation with about 5-6 games to go, and I think we lost every single one.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was all about mentality back then. I think if we manage to get enough points over the next couple of weeks to be mathematically safe, I don't think he'll want to take his foot off the accelerator. I think he'll want to see what that's like. I mean, I described this run kind of that we're having right now. I think I mentioned to you, Steve, before we came on air, is that this is just vintage Moyes for me. He hasn't got many options, but he's found a winning formula. He's obviously got 1 or 2 options off the bench, which he's quite right now he's using really well. It's like what you said there, Gav. We're going to be safe this season, but how do we build on from that?
And he can use this as part of that.
Yeah, but he did build decent squads, back in his first stint, certainly towards the back end of it. Yeah. He's gonna have to kind of do it quickly to kind of match that, whether he can or not. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, let's hope we get some more points in what's left of February and into March. because the April fixtures look horrible.
Yeah, they seem to be fair.
We've got 5 games in April, all against top sides. And actually, you know, I think given the way we're playing at the moment, I would go into that fairly confidently, more confidently than I would have done a month or so ago. Yeah. But it's a hard set of fixtures, that. So if we need to pick up another 6-9 points to be mathematically safe, let's hope we do it before the end of March.
It's an interesting point, that, though, is there? What are hard fixtures in the Premier League?
I think April is distinctively
so
tough.
we got Liverpool. Yeah, but we said that about December. We picked up points in December, didn't we?
Yeah, and then we had the storm.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. I know I'm going off the subject a little bit, but what are hard fixtures in the Premier League?
That's what I was saying.
You can't take any points. You know, okay. I mean, Liverpool at home is probably the hardest 2 or 3 fixtures you've got in the Premier League, haven't you, really? And
well, Liverpool away is in April.
Yeah, okay,
so,
okay. I'm not saying that we're going to go there and play expansive football and 3-0, but it's certainly something. Wolves nearly got a point yesterday, didn't he? And you know, and Arsenal at home, we've got to play. We've got City, have we?
That's at home as well.
Yeah. They put their games. You can get a point from Liverpool at home, albeit the derby's a slightly different vibe. The difficult fixtures, but not fixtures, I think, where you're saying, but like, you know, we were at the start of December, I'll be lucky to get a point off them. What we learned from December is...
Well, the way we were playing in December, of course, it was hard to imagine us picking up a point anywhere.
Yeah, well, yeah, and in the end, what did you get? 6, was it? So it's always that thing, isn't it? What we always say, Ian, is if you get a good sequence of fixtures, you always get fewer points than what you were expecting. If you get a bad sequence of fixtures, you always get more points than what you were expecting. And it may be March and April, they sort of balance each other's out. But I wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't say that we can't get a few points in those games.
No, without a doubt.
The team's under pressure, won't they? Liverpool will be under pressure. Arsenal, if they're still in the title race, will be under pressure.
I mean, you'd say the United game next week is not going to be an easy game, but it would be perceived to be easier than the Brentford game away from home.
Oh yeah,
midweek.
Absolutely.
So that's going to be tough, isn't it?
And so yeah, I'm confident we can get quite a few points. And the other important thing is, was it £3 million a place? Is in the Premier League? Yeah. If you can get me three places up or something like that, that could make the difference between you buying a player or not buying a player in the summer.
I think one of the biggest challenges the squad's got at the moment, of course, is the lack of fit bodies.
Yeah.
So when you're playing every 3 days or so, you know, just let's keep our fingers crossed that we don't end up with another 1 or 2 injuries between now and these April fixtures.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'll be fielding the other under-18s.
Yeah.
Well, we had four youth players on the bench.
Not as many as Man United, though, did we? No. And that means that also gives you an opportunity, doesn't it, Moyes, between the end of the season? Is maybe on occasions give a couple of younger lads a run out, maybe from the subs bench. But I just think we overestimate sometimes. That's what we've learned this season, haven't we, about the Premier League is you know, there's no such thing as big sixes there anymore, where you're thinking, oh, you know, like, so even up pre-COVID, probably going to they're so far ahead of us, you know, as a group. Oh, you're lucky to get a point. Is apart from Liverpool and Arsenal, you know, you're not thinking like that, aren't you? Chelsea, Spurs. I mean, what did we beat Spurs? Was it
3-2?
3-2. It was 3-0 up, weren't we?
Got a magnificent. I was down at the Emirates for the 0-0 draw against Arsenal before Christmas, and it was backed against the wall, but we came away with a point.
And they had a good team. I think Arsenal and Liverpool are the 2 teams that are probably above the rest, but all the others, I mean, and include City in this, you can get a pinch of win easy.
Have you seen that they've potentially going to move the Arsenal game from the original time? I almost don't want it to be a night game after what's happened.
Good point.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, yeah.
Aren't they likely to move it to an early kick-off, though?
Well, they might do. They might do. I don't know what. I think the Bobble tweeted that it was looking like it was going to be moved date or time. I don't know. I'd rather it not be a night game. I'd rather just that be the last night game.
So what is, just for myself and who's watching, what is the date of what date are we talking about the Arsenal game?
I'll have to Google it.
Because middle of April, and it's a 3:00 Saturday kick-off at the moment.
Okay, yeah.
5th of April. It's definitely getting moved by all accounts.
So that's a Saturday kick-off, 3:00, is it? Because they've not announced fixtures yet, have they?
Yeah.
mean, we'll have a few fixtures, won't we? That will be changed. Because there's also a possibility, I wouldn't be surprised if the last game of the season, the Southampton game, last game of Goodson, whether that gets moved to a night game.
Well, it's a Sunday.
Yeah,
it's a Sunday game at the moment.
Just due to the FA Cup, though.
Whether they can move it, maybe it's the Friday night or something. But
I know the club have got a lot planned before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before that game, whether that would fit in, a Friday night would fit in with like a Sunday.
The podcast hosts get to go on the game, go on the pitch before the game. Maybe
probably not. No, unless if I'm recognised a bit more, then
in
maybe.
the Masons, maybe.
You never know.
No, but I just think we overestimate the big six are nowhere near collectively as strong as what they were pre-COVID, and you can there to be shot at and get a few points.
Ian Clark says, as many night games as possible, please. Which is fair enough.
That's fair.
I get it. I just, that memory and that moment.
But that stays there anyway, doesn't it?
It does. But we also play Arsenal. I don't want the last night game to be kind of ruined by maybe like an Arsenal defeat or something like that. I don't want to sound like I'm being defeatist in any way, shape or form.
But in time, that'll go though, in time, won't it?
No, you'll never forget. Let's just quickly still talk about Palace, because it was a resilient, tough win. I remember, Gav, when I think it was before the Bournemouth game, I thought your last appearance, I thought you jinxed us a little bit, because you kind of said...
Never changed there.
No, you said something along the lines of, as long as our defence stays resolute...
Oh, yeah. I can't remember saying that, but obviously...
No, it was a valid point.
It
was a really good point. And then because the defence had been resolute and it would been really good up until that point, and then we had probably the worst performance under Moyes.
One player did.
Yeah.
Really,
but then, obviously, resolute against Liverpool did really well, obviously despite conceding 2 goals. But we had, Steve mentioned, we did have a little bit of a shaky start against Palace.
Yeah. There was a couple of passes went loose, and there was the header awkward header from, was it Tarkovsky? Went out for the corner. Yeah, but once we found our range and settled into it.
Brandt was fantastic, I thought.
He's been really good last few games, hasn't he? And I thought, collectively, I mean, probably maybe the most important thing Everton defender did all night was O'Brien keeping the ball in play from the cross.
Yeah,
for the winner.
Yeah, off the hand of the defender.
And that would have been a penalty, that wouldn't it? Would you think?
You would hope so. Yeah,
there was 2 shouts. I thought at least the first one, at the very least, was definitely a handball.
Yeah, and I just wondered whether in that moment people switched off a little bit.
Palace-wise, Palace defence
just switched off a little bit, and it was a great finish not great finish, it wasn't.
It was a cool finish.
Yeah. There's plenty of Everton players you can think of.
He
in
could
the
have
squad.
Blasted that one wide
over the bar.
He?
Yeah. You can think of a few Everton players in the squad at the moment who would have blasted that over the bar, wouldn't you? Really? And I was in the circumstances. He's probably tired as well, hasn't he? Because I'm not sure how many games he's played of that duration. And it was a cool finish, and he had a good game, didn't he? He goal and an assist for a nice little pass, wasn't it?
I felt like he took a little bit of time to get up to speed, but once he did, you could quite clearly see the quality that he's got.
Yeah,
for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need somebody. We never really replaced that kind of thing. Since I'm not saying it's going to be the same effect as Richarlison, obviously, but we've not really, as a fan base, we've not really had somebody you could sort of, get onto and be a bit of a hero for you. And
Ndiaye was heading that direction.
Way, yeah, and he's now injured. Yeah. But I was thinking, did the South American thing, and
fighting with police officers and stuff.
I wouldn't recommend that. But he's had an incessant week, and he's obviously a bit feisty and stuff. But that's no mean feat for me. That actually, I like that.
We've got a bit of a selection dilemma, to be fair, for United, so we'll come on to that. But what did you just make of the VAR decisions of the game? Because obviously we got one in our favour where the ball went out from a corner.
Well, it looked to me, I would defend the linesman on that. It looked to me, it did swing out and back in again.
Yeah,
of course, I'm not standing there right level with the line, but the linesman was, and he flagged it straight away, really.
Camera angles were terrible for VAR, by the way. I don't know whether that's because of just Selhurst Park and the limitations of that stadium. I don't know. But I mean, I thought it was a goal for them. I don't know why it took 4 minutes to decide.
I totally agree with you, Ian. I had no idea why it took 4 minutes, because I was sort of watching it thinking, I hope this is offside. But it really never, at any time, from the angles we saw, looked offside.
No, yeah. I thought that. I thought you said bad defence. I thought that was a bad goal to concede.
It was two defenders went
too many bounce balls, didn't they?
Yeah.
Not like attacking like the first and second balls, really.
Yeah, and I thought the second goal was in the derby was a bad goal to concede. I thought O'Brien switched off, didn't he, for the second goal? But we got over the line, didn't we? Really, can't complain. 2-1. I think that, as you say, Harrison's such an obvious thing to play in all season. People are saying that all season, playing on the left. I thought he had a good game. He was industrious, put a few quality balls in. And I've been impressed with his little cameos, Irabunum, since he's come back in. Okay. I thought in the excitement of the Tarkowski goal on Wednesday, I'm not sure it's been mentioned, maybe it has done. I thought it was a good header.
Yeah, little
by
nod on,
Burnham. I think he knew exactly what he was doing there.
Yeah.
Because I think he knew that Tarkowski was some distance behind him. And I don't think he just headed it on just for the sake of it, that there may be somebody behind him. He knew, didn't he? Because he got quite a lot of... I mean, from the angle of the cross and stuff, and it wasn't bounced up, so there was not a lot of pace on. He put some force into that header to make sure that the ball reached Tarkowski. And I thought that was really well done by him. And when he's been on the pitch, I think he's looked good. Irabunum, when he's come in.
Yeah.
And he's certainly... I've got a few injuries. He's working him back into contention for the first team spot.
Well, it was a bit devastating when Mangala got injured.
Yeah.
But with the way Jimmy Garner's come in and Tim Irabunum, they've really filled that gap nicely.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a bit of a bonus for us between now and the end of the season.
That's why I wasn't too concerned. Obviously, I was devastated for Mangala because I thought he'd been one of the bright sparks of the season. However, it's coincided with James Garner coming back. My only concern was that if we play him too much, overplay him, is he going to get injured again? But I felt he was a better player than Mangala, certainly.
He's a different player.
He's a different player, without a doubt. But in terms of, you only have to look at that pass that he did for Beto against Leicester. Would Mangala have played that pass? Probably not.
The 40-yard putt into the cup, that wasn't it? That pass from Garner.
Yeah.
No, I'm gutted for him, but at the end of the day, it's a team game, and we've managed to get a player back who's been out injured. Fingers crossed he stays fit now, Garner. I'll just go through some comments and questions because we always leave it late, and I don't want to. And I want to talk about your book, Steve, as well. So, Dave Mack says, Ian, Beto rightly got the plaudits, but look at Jordan Pickford's save. Kept us in the game when we were struggling. So I think it was the save from Mateta. You remember it? I think he did make a really...
Is that to his right, was it?
I'm trying to think now which one it was.
Tipped it over the bar.
Tipped it over the bar, yeah.
So, I mean, we know what Jordan Pickford's about, and he always...
I thought he had a couple of shaky moments in the derby, Pickford. I'm still puzzled how the McAllister goal went in. I mean, that was... I mean, I just...
that was a poor goal to concede.
I thought that was a poor goal to concede, and he got away with one, and he was at the
Szoboszlai.
Yeah, shot, and he parried that out, didn't he? I think Tarkowski was the one who... Was he the one who got in Diaz's way, was it? That was a 1-1 just before the break, wasn't it? So we had a couple of moments in the derby, Pickford. But yeah, decent.
Christopher Stack says, love the podcast, fellas. Always listen. First time watching. It's great to be able to look up the table instead of looking down. Never watched Match of the Day as much in a long time. Do you think we are safe now? I mean, we're not mathematically safe, but we're obviously, do you think we're looking up more than looking down, Steve?
I do. I think 30 points now, it's looking a lot rosier. And we should finish on 40 plus for sure. We can start to look up rather than down, and such a relief because I dreaded the thought of just a few weeks ago of needing something out of that final game at Goodison against Southampton, and then having to go to St James's Park the following weekend for the final game. It should all be wrapped up by then.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was definitely a concern after the Bournemouth game for me that we were heading towards those final two games, and you don't want to be needing to put
Bournemouth,
a point.
What, the league defeat?
Yes.
Yeah.
Defeat.
Absolutely. Oh, by the way, great start to Match of the Day on Saturday.
It was actually,
excellent.
Nice touch.
Yeah, brilliant.
And I loved the little bit where there was a pause where obviously Salah scored in the highlight reel. It's 2-1, and then it took a pause, like a little compilation of hold your breath.
Yeah.
It's coming. It was really good.
Shout out to Archie Rintut on the Guardian podcast on Thursday, who spoke about it was a case of the XG, not expected goals, expected Goodison, and I thought that was quite a good,
nice one,
good shout.
Tazul Islam says so-called pundits should be apologising for criticising Everton for sacking Dyche and getting Moyes, especially clueless Paul Mason. Is that harsh or? He was quite critical, Paul Mason, to be fair, if we're going to pick out one pundit who, said Everton.
That's one, isn't it? Boys,
there was a couple. I think Lee Hendry was one as well.
Yeah, there were quite a few, weren't there, at that time, who all said that Moyes is the same.
Exactly,
as Dyche.
It was ridiculous.
No point in changing how wrong they were.
Yeah, but that's the error, isn't it? Saying he's the same as Dyche. He isn't the same as Dyche. He's got some of Dyche's characteristics, but both centre half managers. But Moyes is a different beast when it comes to setting your teams up and how to get the best out of them.
Absolutely. Mr. Blue Sky says, I see very, very similarities between Alcaraz and Arteta. Technically very good and pick a pass and calm when finishing. And go along with that?
I think Alcaraz has got more in the box.
Okay.
Arteta wouldn't have scored that goal on
no.
They're two different, because they're two different players, I think Alcaraz is far more of an attacking player to me. Arteta was more of a, bit of a quarterback type player.
Yeah, maybe sit back a little bit more.
But would carry the ball off the pitch.
Comparisons are difficult. I mean, I've been sort of equating in my mind Ndiaye to Pienaar of late. Playing similar positions, doing similar things, jinking, dribbling, and so on. But different players bring different things.
Absolutely.
And of course, half of Pienaar's greatness was being part of the Baines-Pienaar combo.
It's a good shout.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
They are filled similar parts of the pitch, but two completely different players.
But I mean, Ndiaye, I'm not saying the partnership's quite there yet with Mykolenko, but massive improvements from Mykolenko, and that was only before he got injured. That only improved.
That's because I was talking about this on the pod. The week Moyes has changed its shape round of the team, hasn't he? By playing O'Brien, who's normally centre half, right back. When we play the ball on the left hand side, the right hand side shifts around to cover. So Mykolenko can bomb down left hand side,
and he's got Baines coaching him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. World class left back coach.
Absolutely. Royal Blue Rich says we're not going down, and it's an interesting one here, Gav. I'm sure you'll have a lot to say on this. Simon says, I really hope that David Weir is appointed as director of football because we need a complete overhaul of the recruitment team. The academy also needs producing more players to make us more sustainable financially. You've obviously credited Kevin Thelwell before, so obviously...
I think you're seeing, I mean... Two of the players that Thelwell has had stick for have been O'Brien and Beto, haven't he? Who've both come in.
But O'Brien, who didn't play at all.
Yeah. So, I get that. Academy is slightly different. So I read an interview with Thelwell a while back where he acknowledged that there was improvements that needed to make at academy level. And I get that, but we always have to, in terms of the players that come through, and the numbers of them that go into the first team, we always have to remember that what is it? Is it only 3% of elite, not any academy player, of elite academy players make a Premier League appearance? It's not as if everybody else is producing 4, 5, 6 players out in the academy in the first team. It's in terms of getting into the first team, it's difficult because I just don't think that it's just difficult. So much stuff going on in football in terms of bringing players in from abroad and so on. Where I think it could be improved, and this is obviously something that they will be working on, is, and it sounds horrible, where academy players just become pieces of meat, don't they, under PSR and get developed and get sold on for £10 million, and they've already made an appearance, and that's a different issue, isn't it? And Thelwell will say, well, who've they sold out of the academy? Gordon, they've had some. And that Sims wasn't really an academy player. Tom Cannon.
Yeah.
They sold, a few for decent money. But that doesn't say it's working, does it? And I think there's been acknowledgement from Thelwell himself that things need to be improved.
For me, the jury's still out with Thelwell. But I saw a graph on Twitter a couple of days ago that the source was Kieran Maguire, and all of the teams that have played in the Premier League in the last 5 years were listed in terms of ranking on net spend. And Everton were absolutely at the top of the list in terms of having a positive net spend in the last 5 years. And we've been outspent by Watford and Luton and pretty well every team. So it's hard to judge Thelwell's performance given that we've just been selling our best players for the best money they could get and bringing in other substitute players who largely, the main advantage of them at a certain time was that their clubs were prepared to negotiate deferred payments. It wasn't so much that Beto cost 25 million or whatever. It was that no money needed to change hands immediately. So that put him at the top of the list.
Yeah. And we said that the other week about Beto. He's not a £26 million player. It's the deal is £26 million, and we paid over the odds for him because we wanted deferred payments, and that means that the club who's selling him, well, if you want deferred payments, we want extra money as part of the deal for him.
That in the past,
and that's the same with O'Brien as well, isn't it? It's like if you go to a bank, isn't it? If you get a loan over 5 years rather than 3 years, you end up paying more money to the bank, don't you? So I think that's how the Beto and O'Brien deals can be explained. But you'd argue that, though we got a positive net spend, that's been Thelwell's job, isn't it? That's credit to Thelwell. That's a test for him, isn't it, really? That you come in, early 22, something like that. So he's spent the last 3 years rectifying the recklessness of the spend in the 5 years, 5-6 years before then, hasn't he? That left us with an enormous wage bill, players who can't be moved on, all that type of thing. He would argue that at the end of the 3 years, we've sort of got a level pegging on PSR that we're now within the limits, so that's can be a movable feast. We've stayed in the Premier League in that time, and we've got reasons for optimism going forward. You'd say that actually, and some of the players we brought in have done good jobs. Sold an arm for 50 million quid for a start. And he would say, well, that judge me on that. And he'd say, well, you've done a decent job then, haven't you?
I think the question is, I don't disagree with any of it. I think the question is now, is he going to be, I don't know whether the phrase is good enough or savvy enough to be able to take us forward, because that's not what we're going to be doing.
That's a different challenge. It goes back to what we were saying before. It's a different challenge. I mean,
also working with David Moyes as well.
Which is going to be a different challenge to Dice, isn't it, really? They've probably got a bit of a honeymoon period, possibly, at the moment, where the test for that is in the summer, if Thelwell stays. But if you look at Thelwell over that 3 years, the challenges that he's had to overcome, and where we are now on the playing side, you'd argue, well, I've done a decent job. But then the job over the next 3 years is completely different, isn't it, really, you would think?
Exactly. Just before we talk about your book, we're going to have loads of preview content for United, obviously, on Saturday. However, there is going to be a bit of a selection dilemma with Decore already serving as one-match ban. Does he come back in the team for you over Alcaraz, or just stick with Alcaraz as the number 10?
I would stick with Alcaraz. I mean, the stats for Decore about the number of games, I think we've only won 4 games in the entire time Decore's been on the books of the club, when he hasn't played. So you think, no brainer, Decore has to play. I'm not sure he's as good a player this season as he has been in some of the seasons in the past. He's obviously getting on a little bit. He still gets around the pitch very well, but the ball doesn't stick to him. His footballing capabilities, I think, are limited in that particular position. And in a number 10 role, you need the ball to stick to you. You need to be able to pass it effectively to bring other players in. And for me, that even though it's a very small sample of a game and a bit, Alcaraz does that a lot more positively. So I'd like to see him hold his position. I think often with, why change a winning side? And I think it's Alcaraz. I would hope that Moyes keeps Alcaraz in the team. If Alcaraz has a bit of an off game or something, then that opens the door again for Decore. But give him a chance.
It breeds competition, doesn't it? Which I think you mentioned a while back, something that we didn't have We've still got limited options either way, but Steve touched upon the stat there. It's the first time we've won without Decore, isn't it? I think since 2022,
wasn't it?
I think it was Palace in October, November. So that's blown that stat out of the water.
You play Alcaraz though.
You go for it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, all day long, because you've got a week off, haven't you? And you can recover. And if you only got him on loan, and we're talking about opportunities in the summer and using the rest of the season to have a look at things. That would be a prime example of feeding into that decision that you play Alcaraz over at Decore. We know what Decore is about, don't you? Really, but Alcaraz showed promise. Play him then instead, yeah.
Jeff Thompson says, now that we have a manager who uses the players correctly, the Thelwell signings are looking very good.
We said that, yeah. I mean, Bettel's he's on a good spell, hasn't he? And you probably say in 3 games he's proved his worth for the entire season, I suppose. But again, whether he's a longer term option is up for debate, isn't it? You want to see what happens between now and the end of the season. But he's been excellent, to be fair.
Steve, we'll finish off talking about your book then. Here it is, the unofficial Everton timeline from 2014 to 2024. The Mashiri years, 2nd edition, the dawn of the Friedkin era. Do you want to go into a little bit of detail? Obviously written by you and Lyndon Lloyd.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. Lyndon, one of the co-founders of the Toffee website. We decided, in fact, the genesis of the concept of writing the first edition came after the thumping 4-1 defeat against Newcastle a few seasons ago.
That was just
when we were in the bottom 3 and it looked desperate. And I was driving home after the game, thinking, I've just got to write something. I'm going to write an article. I'm going to do something to try and put down my thoughts on paper about what's been going on at the club. And I started a draft, and then I got in touch with my pal Lyndon, and we decided that actually it was more than an article. It needed to be a book. So we wrote the first edition, which took us from when Bill Kenwright first met Mashiri in 2014, right up to the end of 2023. And at that time, of course, the Mashiri years was still kind of very live and an open sore. It had been a game of 2 halves, let me put it that way. The first 5 years had been one of spend on lots of things, most of which had been a waste of money on and off the pitch. And then this austere period that we'd had as a result of PSR and basically Mashiri running out of cash after the untimely invasion of Ukraine by Russia. That was never in the plan, Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And immediately, Usmanov was sanctioned and by the British and European governments, and the money to Everton just dried up overnight, the sponsorship, and all of the idea that actually Usmanov would become the naming rights sponsor for the new stadium. All of that just changed overnight. So he had bad luck, did Mashiri. But his judgment in terms of governance and judgment for me was always a concern, but never more so than when he said, we've looked at 777 and they're the best people I can find to take over this fine club. So the first edition took us to the end of 2023. And so much, and I'll repeat what I said at the start of the conversation, so much happened in 2024 for Everton on and off the field. So we felt that we needed to update the book to write the second edition. And that also gave us chance to actually do something that I don't believe anybody else has ever done before in the history of publishing books about Everton. And you've published a few, Gav, that's for sure, very good ones.
Thank you.
But that is to actually produce an audio book.
Yeah.
It's 700 pages. There's a lot of words within it, more than 150,000 words, including the 3 new chapters in the second edition. That's 78 chapters. And for better or worse, the narrator behind all of this is me.
Okay.
So my
I've
wife,
listened to it. Yeah.
so my wife would often say to me that when I came to bed at night, I was talking about the Mashiri years in my sleep.
Yeah.
Nightmares.
Probably not the only Everton supporters in that. There's probably, probably nightmares of fans. I think it was after that you sent me the first time, had 666 pages in 666. I just thought that seems so apt, you know.
Oh,
yeah. Oh, no, it's a great book. I've read the book and the audio one as well. Yeah.
Have we come out the other side then, do you think? Brighter future
I think so.
ahead?
I think it's for me now, the beauty of the book is actually being able to reflect on a traumatic period in the club's history, but with the knowledge that we've come out of the other end. Of course, there's always so much more. The ongoing Everton timeline, we'll see what the future brings. But a year ago, it was an open sore. There was real, genuine concern by me, by every Evertonian, as to what the future was going to hold. And now I think, the Mashiri years is definitely over. We are into the dawn of the Friedkin era. And one of the key success factors for the Friedkin group will be recruitment. If they can get recruitment right, and yes, it all flows from the vision that they have for the club, but if they can get recruitment right on and off the pitch, then that's the secret to success. And that's what Mashiri got so badly wrong. His judgment, his hubris, the fact that he didn't bring in top professionals to run the club. He was persuaded by Bill that keeping the old guard in place was the right thing to do. And for a foreign businessman who lives on a yacht in Monaco, well, it probably seems like a good idea to have people local who know and care and that can run the club. But that was a tragic mistake, because even when they had chance to bring in new people, a new chief executive when Robert Elstone left the club, a new finance director when Sasha Razantsev left the club, new non-executive directors when Keith Harris left the club, he allowed Bill to put in place his devotees. And what that meant was there were comfortable relationships, and nobody really in a position of power to challenge the emperor and tell him that he had no clothes. And this had so many consequences. So, yeah, it's a time now to look forward and not back. But actually, it is helpful to have a volume like the one we've produced that you can read or listen to actually absorb what really went on in that traumatic period of time and reflect on it and learn the lessons.
And where can we get the book then? Because we've already had a comment from Daniel Reel saying link to Steve's book.
Well, by all means, put a link in the podcast if you're able to do that.
Will do.
You can buy the book, both the e-book and the print copy, on Amazon. You can also go to Amazon to download the audio book. It's all in the same section. Just go to Amazon and search for the unofficial Everton timeline 2014 to 2024. And the audio book is also available on audible.com and on Apple Books.
Yeah, if you send me a link, we'll get that in the description of both the YouTube webpage as well as the audio platforms. We've also still got Gav's book in there as well.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
You didn't know Gav's got a book out as well?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's fascinating when I've read the book and listened to it, and your voice is perfectly fine. I really enjoyed listening to it. It's fascinating. It's only a 8-year period or something. And it's incredible the amount of stuff that's happened in that time. I mean, and I think we may have had this conversation at the time when the first issue came out. Was it last March? Was it the first issue came out? You must have thought as soon as that's published, or even when you were finishing it, that there's going to be another book or an extension to this, because it was just it was just so fluid, wasn't it? The way it was changing. And I think we said that, there's another book here about it, because there was just so much stuff going on and off the pitch. And I think and you may know this more than me, Steve, if the Freakins want to know how to run Everton Football Club over the next X years, they can do worse than read this book, as you say, and just look at all the mistakes that were made both on and off the pitch is the best tribute I can give to it, and it's history of Everton from year zero to, as I said to you, yesterday afternoon, really, and that, because it's up to date, it's a commentary of what's gone on over the last year. It always makes it a better book, doesn't it? You've lived through it. It's still in the memory then, isn't it, really? Unlike me writing about 50 years ago and boring the pants off him, but it is. It's contemporary, isn't it?
And it's on and off the pitch. I think for me, it's interesting, as a writer, to be able to look at the story chronologically, and not just off the pitch, not just on the pitch, but actually to weave it all together.
Yeah.
Because what happens off the pitch, I think we as Evertonians have all learnt this very much, even though we're much more interested in what's going on the pitch, really, week in, week out. But it's actually the events off the pitch that inform and allow the events
I'd argue the other way around as well. What goes on the pitch affects what goes off the pitch in terms of results. I mean, you spot on. I mean, we've said many times on this podcast, haven't we, saying over the last couple of years, is you can do a podcast and you've been talking for an hour and you've not even mentioned on the pitch once.
There was too much talk about off the field issues, wasn't it? And even then, when you were going back to on the field issues, it was just as depressing. So it was tough, wasn't it?
Yeah. But it just shows you how football has changed so much. As probably goes back 30, 40 years, certainly 40 years to the mid-80s, when football tried to become more corporate, that, the end game was all the stuff off the pitch was going to be just as important or even more important than what was going on the pitch in terms of results.
Yeah. Well, your book covers that, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that's when it changed, in the mid-late 80s, early 90s. And not just because of Sky in the Premier League, it was changed before then. And that we are very much the results, what you've written about there, that is the natural end product of that. Is you might hear success stories about clubs who've become very rich, like Man United, and the opposite effect is somebody like Everton, where it goes disastrously wrong through poor decision making. And there's other clubs out there, obviously, certainly further down the league. And we saw what happened with Leeds, which is, I know you said Leeds 20 years ago, and we could have been another Leeds, couldn't we?
Definitely. And for me personally, and I'm sure, I know I'm not alone in this, but actually Everton's problems over the recent years had a real negative effect on my mental health.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I found myself at times, it sounds ridiculous, grown man, found myself at times, my sleep patterns were all over the place.
Yeah.
It was really depressing me. And so writing the book was actually quite cathartic. It was a bit of a stress reliever, being able to put it down on paper. And I'm hoping now, without, at least knowing that we have a happier outcome at the end of it all, that people being able to read or listen will also find a similar way of it helps kind of relieve the stress of the period that we've gone through.
I was just about to ask you a question on that. Would you have gone through all of this to have the stadium as an Everton fan?
If it was the only other alternative.
6 months ago, before Freakins, at the time that they pulled out, I was having a conversation with a close friend of mine. And for me, it was 50-50, 50% that the stadium would actually be the thing that brought the club down.
We spoke about this before, yeah.
That that the finances were so severe, so problematic, that it would be the stadium that would be the catalyst that would allow 777 or somebody like that to come in through the door and ultimately see the end of the club. The other 50% said, actually, it's such a brilliant stadium, it's going to be the hook that brings in external investors, quality investors.
Yeah, but now we're here and that's all being sorted. Is that pain where does the stadium balance that out, do you think?
I don't think that... I think the stadium could have been achieved in a different way.
Right,
If Mashiri gambled on two things. One was that Everton would break into the top four, and with it would get the riches of the Champions League. And he also gambled on the ongoing financial support of Alisher Usmanov and his companies.
Yeah.
And he never had contingency plans for one or both of those things. And it turned out that both of those things didn't materialize in the long term. Why he never put in place long-term, low-interest finance for the stadium still baffles me. I can only assume it was because he had an agreement with Alisher Usmanov that they wouldn't do that because the money would be available through Usmanov.
Yeah.
And then when the Russian invasion of Ukraine came in, that completely blew those plans out of the water. By that time, interest rates were on the rise and the better deals were never in place. But if he'd done nothing else in his tenure than but put in long-term finance at low interest rates around 2020, 21, when they got planning permission, then we could have achieved the stadium build with so much less stress.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess poignantly, just to finish off, first visit tonight at the new stadium as well. So that is, yeah, I'm looking forward to it myself. Can't wait. Final thoughts then, Gav, before we finish off?
On Steve's book?
Well, just anything in general.
Just in general.
A lot of, decent...
Well, thanks for everybody for watching and the people who, at the moment, and those who subsequently listen to it. It's always great to hear.
Yeah.
Positive feedback on the podcast, which I get.
Well, yeah, Mark Murphy says, really interesting pod, especially Steve's take on the Mashiri years. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's worth coming on. Steve's... It's always good to have guests on, isn't it? Steve's been excellent as ever.
Absolutely.
And I hugely recommend the book. And trying to sell the book, he's going, oh no, it's keeping me awake at night. But but it's a time we've all lived through, and it's all fresh in the memory, isn't it? And so consequently, when you read it, it sort of really resonates. Because it's not like 40 or 50 years ago. It's still fresh in the memory, and you can still think about it in the context of podcasts like we've been on and what other people have said. So there's a lot of shared experience. That everybody reading that book has got the same experience of reading the book. But if you're writing a book about 40 years ago, that's not necessarily the case. And I think that's the benefit of it, really, for me. And I don't think you're alone, as I say, keeping you awake at night. I think there's quite a few people like that, but hopefully those days are behind us. And
better night's sleep in the future for you, Steve. Hopefully.
I hope so, and so does my wife.
Absolutely.
Did you find a cathartic experience writing it? Did you?
Yes. Yes, I did. And actually, even more so, frankly, with just the second edition and doing the audio book, because by that stage we got the happier outcome that we all craved for.
Yeah, happy ending.
Well, hopefully it's never an ending, is it, with Everton Football Club? But hopefully
Very true. Of this chapter.
It's a happy chapter, I think.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed coming up. Okay, well, it's been a lengthy one, but it has been a good one. Just a reminder, Wednesday, Dave Powell is going to be in the studio to talk all things Freaking, PSR, and everything along those lines as well. And then we'll have the preview podcasts ahead of Manchester United, which will go out on Friday. That is all for today's show. Please remember to give us a like and subscribe to the channel. Drop us some 5-star reviews on Apple and Spotify. Keep an eye out for Steve's book. The link will be in the description below. Most importantly, enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your week. I've been Ian Croll, joined by Gav Buckland and Steve Dickinson. And this has been the Royal Blue Podcast.